Hi guys, it's Emma AITA, your favorite AI slop tuber. Before we jump into today's video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks so much for your support. Now, let's get right into the video. AITA for evicting my best friend after he lied to my landlord and almost got me kicked out of my apartment. I, 28 male, live in a city that's absolutely brutal when it comes to rent. After college, I lucked into a rent-controlled unit that's not exactly glamorous, but it's in a decent neighborhood and doesn't bleed me dry every month. It's one of those old 3-story brownstones split into 4 apartments, and I've been living here for almost 5 years. Over that time, I developed a cordial relationship with the landlord, Mrs. Franklin, a retired schoolteacher in her 70s. She's always been fair, a little nosy at times, but not a tyrant. She lives in the unit on the bottom floor, and I'm on the second, so we bump into each other often enough. About a year ago, my best friend, Kevin, 27 male, hit a rough patch. He'd been working freelance gigs in film production, and COVID had already wiped out a big chunk of his client base. Then his lease ended, and with no steady income, no savings, and family 3 states away, he asked if he could crash with me, just for a few weeks. At first, I hesitated, not because I didn't want to help, but because my lease strictly prohibited long-term guests without prior approval. But Kevin was practically like a brother to me. We'd been roommates in college, taken road trips, even weathered the same heartbreaks and stupid financial decisions in our 20s. So, I said yes, on the condition that he'd keep a low profile and that it wouldn't be for more than a month. That was 11 months ago. At first, things were fine. Kevin took the couch and kept his things in 2 suitcases. He was respectful of my space, helped with groceries, even cooked. I told Mrs. Franklin I had a guest in town for a couple of weeks, and she just smiled and said, "Young people need to stick together." No red flags, no tension. But over time, Kevin got comfortable. Too comfortable. He started bringing in boxes of stuff from his old storage unit, gradually colonizing the living room, then the kitchen. Eventually, he bought a used mattress off Craigslist and asked if he could keep it temporarily in the hallway so he wouldn't have to sleep on the couch. When I protested, he said, "Dude, it's just a hallway." Like that was a rational argument. The final straw came when I got a notice from Mrs. Franklin taped to my door saying she needed to discuss the changes in household occupancy. My stomach dropped. I knocked on her door that evening, and she calmly asked if Kevin was living with me full-time. I panicked and gave her some nonsense about how he was in transition, not really living there, and would be gone soon. She raised an eyebrow but didn't push further. When I told Kevin what happened, he shrugged it off. "What's the big deal? She's just nosy. I'm not even using your room. If anything, I'm like a glorified houseplant that eats leftovers." He thought it was funny. I did not. I reminded him, again, that my lease strictly prohibited long-term guests, and that this could jeopardize my entire living situation. Kevin rolled his eyes and said he'd talk to Mrs. Franklin himself and clear things up. I begged him not to. I didn't trust him to not say something that would get me evicted, but he went behind my back the next morning and did it anyway. What I didn't expect was for him to lie. When I got home from work that evening, Mrs. Franklin was waiting outside her door like she had been planted there. She didn't look angry. She looked smug, in that quiet, disappointed teacher sort of way that makes you feel about 2 inches tall. She told me, very politely, that she had just spoken with Kevin and was glad to know that I had taken on a roommate and was settling into a more adult lifestyle. I felt my stomach lurch. I asked her what exactly he had said. Apparently, Kevin had told her he was officially living with me, that he had just lost his job but was looking for a new one, and that we had agreed to split rent 50-50 going forward. He even gave her a sob story about coming from a broken home and how I'd taken him in like a brother. He said he'd eventually sign on to the lease and would be paying rent as soon as his next gig comes through. I was floored. Not only had he lied, he had doubled down on the lie in a way that made it sound permanent, premeditated, and directly against the terms of my lease. Mrs. Franklin said she appreciated our honesty and that she would be raising the rent slightly to account for the added wear and tear, and she'd be expecting both of us to sign a new lease within 30 days, or she'd have to reconsider continuing the rental relationship. I didn't even bother knocking on the door when I got to my unit. I threw it open, saw Kevin on the couch with a bag of chips, and let loose. I wasn't yelling, but my voice was shaking with anger. I asked him what the hell he thought he was doing. His answer? "Relax. I was just trying to help. Now she knows I'm here. It's above board. You don't have to lie anymore." I couldn't believe it. I explained, again, that this apartment wasn't meant for 2 legal tenants. The building wasn't zoned for that occupancy. If he had just left it vague, maybe we could have bought time. But now we had a paper trail. Now she had expectations. Rent hike, lease rewrite. And on top of it, I'd been lying to her for nearly a year. Because of him. Kevin's response? He shrugged and said, "So what? We just signed the new lease. I'll start paying rent once I land something." I asked him very directly what income he had coming in. He said nothing was solid yet, but something would turn up. I told him that wasn't good enough, that I wasn't going to be chained to a legal agreement with someone who had no income, no timeline, and no intention of respecting the terms of my original lease. He got defensive and said I was being elitist and kicking someone while they're down. That night, I stayed at a friend's place. I needed to cool off, and I couldn't stand to look at him. The next morning, I told him he had 2 weeks to leave. Kevin stared at me like I'd just punched him in the face. "Are you serious?" he asked, still half asleep, rubbing his eyes like this was all a dream he could just shake off. I told him yes, dead serious. 2 weeks. That was more than fair, considering he had been living rent-free for almost a year, had lied to my landlord, and put me in jeopardy of losing the one stable thing in my adult life, my apartment. He started pleading at first. The guilt trip was intense. He reminded me of how I let him crash at my dorm when his roommate was stealing his stuff. He talked about the time he covered my rent when I was between jobs. He brought up every vulnerable moment we'd ever shared as proof that I was being heartless. But none of it changed the fact that what he did was a complete betrayal, not just of our friendship, but of my trust, my autonomy, and my legal standing. Then he got angry. He accused me of being a sellout, of being just another landlord in disguise. He ranted about how I was kicking him out to protect some old white lady who doesn't even need the money. The irony, of course, being that Mrs. Franklin is black and she does need the money. She depends on this income to get by in retirement. But he didn't care. He wanted to spin a narrative where he was the oppressed homeless artist and I was the villain playing foot soldier for the system. The 2 weeks that followed were a slow descent into passive-aggressive hell. He barely spoke to me, except to grunt or scoff under his breath. He stopped cleaning up after himself. Dirty dishes, laundry piles, food wrappers, like he was proving a point. One night, he left the front door unlocked while I was at work. Another, he had some friends over, drinking and playing music loud enough to vibrate the floor. Mrs. Franklin knocked on my door the next morning to check if everything was okay, and noted that she didn't recall allowing parties on weeknights. I realized Kevin was trying to get back at me by sabotaging my standing with the landlord. It was petty, and it was cruel, and it only confirmed that I'd made the right choice. I started documenting everything: texts, photos, timestamps. I didn't want this to spiral into a legal mess, but I wasn't going to be caught off guard. The day before his deadline, Kevin asked for an extension, said he had nowhere to go. I told him that wasn't my problem anymore. He cursed at me, called me a snake, a fake friend, said I was going to die alone in that apartment, some lonely old man who put rules before people. He left the next evening while I was at work, took most of his stuff, left the mattress in the hall, and a half-eaten bag of chips on the counter like a final middle finger. No note, no message, just silence. I cleaned the apartment that night like I was scrubbing off a bad dream. After Kevin left, the silence in my apartment was almost disorienting. For the first couple of days, it felt like I had forgotten something, like I was still anticipating him to stumble out of the bathroom, groggy and shirtless, or to find his shoes dumped by the front door. But no, it was just me. And for the first time in over a year, I could actually exhale without tension gripping the inside of my ribs. I met with Mrs. Franklin 2 days later. I came clean. I told her I hadn't intended to deceive her, but that things spiraled. I explained that Kevin wasn't supposed to stay more than a couple weeks, and that I hadn't anticipated him lying to her and turning it into something official. I showed her my texts, the photos, the notice I gave him. I said I understood if she wanted to increase the rent or revisit the lease, but I asked, honestly and humbly, if we could move forward with just me on the agreement again. She listened quietly, then asked me one question. "Do you think he was ever really your friend?" It hit me harder than I thought it would. The truth is, Kevin had always been someone who operated in a fog of chaos, endearing, funny, a great time at a party, but rarely grounded. He didn't take accountability for much, and the few times he did help me in the past always came with strings attached. His generosity was like a bank loan, unspoken interest rates and vague threats if you didn't repay the favor when he thought the time was right. And when I didn't play along, he punished me. That wasn't friendship. That was manipulation, dressed up in loyalty and nostalgia. Mrs. Franklin agreed to keep the rent the same, under the condition that I'd let her know if anyone ever stayed for more than a week. I agreed without hesitation. I felt like I had earned back a tiny piece of her trust, and that mattered to me more than I realized. In the weeks that followed, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Kevin was couch surfing and posting a lot of passive-aggressive stuff on social media, cryptic quotes about betrayal, loyalty, and being used. I muted him. I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to carry the weight of his inability to take responsibility. But the guilt lingered, as guilt often does. Not because I thought I'd done the wrong thing, but because it's hard to shut off the part of you that wants to fix people, even when they don't want to be fixed. It's hard to admit that someone you thought was a lifelong friend would sell you out for comfort and then blame you for it when it all crumbled. So, here I am. Months later, still in my apartment. The walls are quiet, the dishes get done, the rent gets paid, the door gets locked at night. And I'm slowly unlearning the version of friendship I thought I had to accept. I've been thinking about what Kevin said, that I'd die alone in this place, some lonely guy with rules and boundaries. But you know what? I'd rather be alone in peace than stuck in a constant emotional war with someone who mistakes loyalty for entitlement.